Well, welcome back, everyone, to Fantasy Al Dente, the live fantasy show to get your lineups all set right before kickoff. Joined, as always, by Ummer and Josh. Gentlemen, good morning. How are you?
Doing
Doing
excellent.
well, Ryan.
Good,
Yep.
good. Well, it's we had a bye week last week, so we're happy to be back on. Um, I do want to run through a couple quick injury notes before we jump in. Kenny Stills with the Dolphins was listed as questionable with a groin injury. He should be a go. You guys can jump into if you have anything or if I mess anything up. I'm kind of just quickly reading through everything. Looks like the Browns are expecting Callaway and Higgins both to play. Don't know if they're you want them fantasy relevant, but if you need to, there you go. Um, a few other ones here. Let's see.
I got two bigger names.
Yeah,
Chris
please.
Thompson. Chris Thompson of the Washington Redskins is out, so Adrian Peterson's stock is a little bit higher this week.
Yep.
And Stephon Diggs is not playing this week either, so that
Yes.
raises the stock of Adam Thielen, as well as supplemental receivers, possibly Laquan Treadwell. But we brought this name a couple weeks up. We brought this name up a couple weeks ago. Aldrick Robinson, his stock may be a little bit higher this week.
There you go. Yeah, if Adam Thielen needs his stock to be raised, I don't know about that, but Chris Carson, running back for the Seahawks, is a game time decision, but they're optimistic he will play, so that is expected.
Yes.
Melvin Gordon was questionable, but he'll be playing. Randall
Yep.
Cobb is also expected to play tonight.
Yep.
Royce Freeman, running back for the Broncos, expected not to play. I think with the bye week being next week, figured hold him out one more week. Alex Collins, who was held out of practice Thursday, he's expected to play. And probably last one to really mention right now is Dalvin Cook is expected to potentially get some snaps today. We'll see how limited or used he is. But yeah, that's all I have for now.
One more name to add to that, Ryan. Going back to the Green Bay game,
Mm.
Geronimo Allison is out also. So Cobb is expected to play, but I believe Geronimo Allison will not be. So that boosts. I'm going to say his name wrong, but that's MSV,
Yeah,
Marquez Valdez Scantling.
yeah. MVS. There you go.
Yes, MVS, rather. Yes.
That was my high school too. MVHS.
Oh,
But
okay.
there you go.
There you
There you
Yeah,
go.
Ryan's high school. Um, Also in that game, just to mention, I know Sonny Michelle and Gronk are both questionable. They're both going to give it a go at pregame. I think Gronk will play. I think Michelle, personally, I think he'll be held out. So he's someone I would regardless stay away from being the late game. You don't want to be screwed holding on to him and starting, and then all of a sudden you got no one to choose from.
Yeah, I agree with that. Gronk, I
Mhm.
think, has spent his entire career questionable and usually plays.
Yeah,
So yeah, I think Gronk plays, and Michelle, I don't think he goes.
yeah, I think they'll hold him out another week. So, all right, well there you have it. There's the main injury news. But let's get into our DFS. We are using DraftKings this week. We kind of are doing a little bit different from here on out. We're going to do the Al Dente Duel, where we pit Josh and Ummer against each other. They pick their lineups. We're going to track them throughout the day. See who does best. See who you want to follow week to week. So, Ummer, we'll start with you. We got your lineup right in front of us, but go ahead and break it down for us.
Sure. At quarterback, I got Russell Wilson. He was a relatively cheap option this week, and Russell Wilson's been playing pretty good the last couple weeks now. He has three straight games with three touchdowns at least, so and almost three straight games with 20 fantasy points as well. So I like Russell Wilson this week against the Chargers. As we talked about, Chris Thompson is out, so Adrian Peterson has that much more value this week. He's also playing Atlanta, so that's another sign that Adrian Peterson is going to have another good week.
Mm-hmm.
Kareem Hunt, this guy has totally picked it up after starting the season slow. He's playing Cleveland, and with them having all the firing and front office issues, firing Hugh Jackson, firing Todd Haley, I'm not sure what sort of Cleveland team we'll be seeing. That's an advantage that Kansas City could definitely take advantage of. So I like Kareem Hunt this week. Um, for wide receivers, I like Kenny Galladay. With a trade of Golden Tate to Philadelphia, I think this totally raises Kenny Galladay's stock for the rest of the season. Marvin Jones also will see an increase in target share, but Kenny Galladay has had such a great season this year, and I expect that to continue, if not meteorically continue for sure for the rest of the season. As we talked about, Stephon Diggs is not playing. So Adam Thielen is, I mean, like you said, Ryan, does his stock need to go any higher? But it can a little bit, I guess, this week. So I like Adam Thielen this week. For wide receiver, I like DJ Moore against Tampa Bay. Torrey Smith for the Panthers is out this week, so DJ Moore should see a lot more of those secondary targets to pair up with Devin Funches.
Mm-hmm.
And DJ Moore has slowly been getting more used to the offense, and he's getting more targets in the offense as well. So I like him against Tampa Bay divisional game. He should see a lot of balls thrown his way. For tight end, Chris Herndon of the New York Jets, 3 straight weeks, 3 straight touchdowns. I know he's very touchdown dependent, but with such question marks in the wide receiver group in New York, Chris Herndon has really been able to take advantage of that and has really grown. He's really grown a relationship with Sam Darnold, so I like him going forward, especially this week against a Miami defense that has not looked as good as when they initially started the season as well. In the flex, I like Kenyon Drake against Miami as well. He's definitely picked it up. I know we've been on his case for a while on this podcast as just
Mm-hmm.
who is Kenyon Drake and what's happening with him. But
Right.
I think he's finally started to pick it up in the last couple weeks, and I think this is a week where he'll continue that trend. And for defense, I like the Texans defense against the Denver Broncos. I'm sorry, Ryan, but
It's okay.
they're definitely playing a lot better these last couple weeks. And with Denver trading away Demarius Thomas, I don't know how that running game and that passing off, just the offense in general, I don't know how that's going to operate with the changes there. So yeah, I like the Texans to handle this game pretty easily.
Yeah, and with Freeman being out, and we saw the running game actually in Denver look great last week against Kansas City, but Houston has a much more formidable defense. So,
Mm-hmm,
no offense taken, Amar. So, all right, Josh, well, let's go through your DraftKings lineup.
Sure, absolutely. So at quarterback, I've got Ryan Fitzpatrick. I think with the switch, the Tampa Bucks offense actually was, it was playing a lot better under Fitzpatrick the first few weeks of the season than it has been with Jameis.
They were
And,
not to cut you off, but were they
yeah,
not the number one offense, or maybe top? They were top three, I believe.
yeah. I mean, it was them in Kansas City to start the season for sure. And I mean, for the first 3 games, 3 out of 4 games, Fitzpatrick was on fire. He was crushing it. Their number one receiver, Mike Evans, scored a touchdown, I believe, every week with Fitzpatrick the first 3 weeks of the season, and since then, I think he's only scored once with Jameis. So Fitzpatrick has a good connection with Evans.
Mm-hmm.
That's always something you want. Quarterback, number one receiver. He's also relatively cheap on DraftKings, which is with DFS huge. You got to save up some money to spend up at other places. So I really like Ryan Fitzpatrick as my quarterback this week. For my running backs, I also have Kareem Hunt. I completely agree with everything Umar had to say there. I think Hunt is a great value. He's worth spending up for, but he's not the most expensive running back on the slate. That's Todd Gurley now and forever. But I think Hunt can produce similarly to that level. So I like Kareem Hunt this week. Being a full PPR format, my second running back, I'm going to go James White. As we said, we don't expect Sony Michel to play. Even if he does play, James White has been crushing it in the passing game. That's going to be a high-scoring game. New England, Green Bay, PPR format, James White all the way.
Mm-hmm.
So because I spent up a little bit there, and I'm going to spend up at tight end a little later, we had to go cheap with the wide receivers. So I went Brandon Cooks, who, I expect that to be a high-scoring game as well. Rams, New Orleans. I don't expect them to be able to lean on Gurley as much as they have. They're going to have to put points on the board on both sides of the ball. So I'm going Brandon Cooks. We're going to go Cortland Sutton as my second wide receiver. He's ridiculously cheap on DraftKings. It's only $3,900. I mean, you're scraping the bottom of the barrel there. But Demarius Thomas is gone. So, Sutton's going to have to step his game up. It's going to be Sutton, Sanders, and who?
Mm-hmm.
Right? I
Yeah.
mean, Ryan, you know
Tim
better than
Patrick.
me, obviously. Well, what's it?
I was just throwing names out, but yeah, that's who it is.
Right. So, I mean, Sutton, I don't necessarily know if this is the week, but it's his first opportunity, and he's very, very cheap. We're going with Sutton. For my third wide receiver, I want, I'm going to say his name wrong again, Marquise Valdez Scantling, MVS. As we said, Geronimo Allison is out. Randall Cobb is questionable. I expect this to be a high-scoring game. So I'm going Marquez Valdez Scantling. There's a very good chance he could catch a deep ball, 50-yard touchdown from Rodgers. That's something, with all the coverage going to be shifted towards Adam. And even they're probably going to be looking at Jordy Nelson in the short target range area when they get in the red zone. So I believe that Valdez Scantling has a really good shot to score this week.
Yeah.
Tight
Probably
end.
not Jordy Nelson since he's on the Raiders, but I get what you're saying.
What did I say? Jordy
Jordy
Nelson?
Nelson.
I'm sorry. I meant Jimmy Graham.
Yes,
Yeah. Oh,
Jimmy Graham, yeah.
I knew what you were going for.
yeah, yeah.
That's why we're a
That's who I
team here.
I think Jordy
Um,
Nelson wishes to be playing with the Packers based on
oh,
I
I think Aaron Rodgers wishes Jordy Nelson was still playing with the Packers.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Thanks for catching that, Ryan. Tight end, going to spend up again at Travis Kelce. I mean, there's no one better than Kelce at this point. Gronk, I don't want to necessarily call him a bust, but the value you paid for him on draft day compared to what he's given back outside of week one, he's been a bust. Gronk has not been himself. He hasn't looked right. He really hasn't been putting up points, not to the level of the second round draft pick that he was this season. So Travis Kelce is the far and away number one tight end in my opinion, and he's worth paying up for. In flex, I'm going to go Nick Chubb. He's taken over that role as the RB1 in the backfield. I expect them to lean on him. I think that they know they can't compete with Kansas City putting points on the board. So what I think they do is I think they try to run the ball and eat time up off the clock, keep their offense on the field, keep Kansas City and Patrick Mahomes on the sideline as often as they can. A lot of teams use this tactic against high octane offenses like Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, back when Peyton Manning was playing Manning. Like this was a very common thing teams do. They try to run the ball and keep the offenses on the sideline. So I think Nick Chubb is a good play this week as well. Again, he's also cheap. And last but not least, I'm going to go Cowboys defense. Save some money at defense. The Bears are the obvious choice, but the Cowboys are very cheap on DraftKings. Titans, I don't know if they know what the word offense is. Their defense is the only thing saving them. Mariota has been very subpar. They have almost no run game to speak of, and their wide receivers outside of Corey Davis are a huge question mark. So Cowboys defense.
Yeah, it's interesting that their offensive coordinator Matt LaFleur is still kind of among head coaching candidates, and that offense has been horrendous. So, that's a different conversation. So, well, there you have it. There's your DFS DraftKings lineups of the week. You can we have I will put the lineup cards up on Twitter if everyone wants to take a look at those, so you have something to go off of. But thank you, gentlemen, for that. Good luck. Were we using those lineups in straight up tournament plays? Both.
I mean, I had built my lineup more for a cash game
Perfect
standpoint. I mean, you could definitely use some of it in DFS as well. Going for the super cheap receivers like Cortland Sutton and Marquise Valdez-Scantling is definitely the kind of thing that can win you a big tournament. Saving money on receiver, expecting a big play, like a Deshaun Jackson kind of player, and then spending up for players like Kareem Hunt, Travis Kelce. That can definitely work in tournaments as well.
Yeah, just looking at both rosters that were built out, I think my roster is probably better suited for cash games and head-to-head, whereas Josh took a few more risks, so those might be better for tournament plays. But yeah, I'm pretty sure you could use both for either format. But yeah, just based on the players for both rosters, I'd probably say my roster is probably better suited for cash games, and Josh is probably better suited for tournament plays.
Right. Well, there you go. Well, we're gonna track it. We're gonna keep score going here on out throughout the season. So, we'll have a little prize at the end. I'll think of something fun. So, winner takes something. But all right, well, let's jump into the rest of our fantasy program before these games get kicking off. The way we do it here, we go position by position. We give you our hot starts, give you our cold sits. If you have any questions, ask it to us live. We will get those either as they come in or at the end of the show. We'll kind of run through a bunch of them, just real rapid fire style. So, Amr, I'll stick with you right now. Some QB starts that you're loving this week. Yeah, go right ahead.
Well, I already mentioned earlier, he's my DFS quarterback, Russell Wilson against the Los Angeles Chargers. Almost 3 straight weeks with 20 fantasy points. He had 19.9 a couple weeks ago, but the other two he had 20. So he's definitely trending upwards after starting the season slow, and a lot of people are now thankful that he's starting to trend back upwards. So, and he's also playing Chargers defense that's very middle of the road, so I expect him to perform really well. I like Dak. I like Deshaun Watson this week against the Broncos. Um, he just dropped 31 against the Miami Dolphins on Thursday night. Now, you could argue that the Dolphins looked worse than Deshaun Watson looked great, but I mean, it still takes some sort of effort from Watson to look really good too. I mean, he has to take advantage of what's given to him, right?
Hmm.
So, throw in the fact that they just acquired Demarius Thomas, I think that really gives them two solid options on the outside. I mean, I do like Kiki Kuti and Will Fuller; those are solid guys, but we kind of talked about those are just the deep threat guys, the nine route, the home run play. Whereas Demarius Thomas is a move the chains guy. DeAndre Hopkins is just a future Hall of Fame type guy. I mean, so it's just like
Yeah, don't remind
now
me.
having two legitimate options on the outside where they can just run the entire route tree and totally take advantage of what's coming against them as far as the secondary. That's going to just skyrocket Deshaun Watson's stock for the rest of the season. Um, and the Denver Broncos defense has been looking a little shaky the last couple weeks too. So definitely, I like Deshaun Watson this week. And as a sleeper play, this is the name I was about to say, Dak Prescott versus the Titans. Um, he has back-to-back games with 20 fantasy points. I know he's yet to throw for 300 yards, but he's also had back-to-back rushing touchdowns. So he's finally moving in the pocket, getting outside, making plays with his legs. So he's definitely increasing his chances for more fantasy points every week. And as we talked about, the Titans' offense is such a joke right now that their defense has become a lot more susceptible because they have to be on the field so much longer. Um, so as good as their defense can be, is just if you're on the field 30 35 minutes of the game, possibly even 40, your defense is going to get tired, and as good as you can be, you're not going to sustain that for the entire four quarters of a game. So this is where Prescott and the offense can really take advantage. Also, couple that with the fact that they're coming off a bye week, they have extra week to prepare. They just acquired Amari Cooper; they're going to get him involved. So yeah, as a sleeper play, I like Dak Prescott versus the Titans.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I could. I mean, I know a lot of fantasy owners have been wanting him to kind of break out of his slumber, if you will, and maybe this is the week he does it. So, Josh, over to you
I
for.
think the bye week really helps with that. That I think finally they'll get more involved with the offense, and like I said, now they can involve Amari Cooper, and hopefully it should be better. At least I'm pretty sure Josh is hoping they get better.
Yeah. So, hey, interesting that both two of your QB starts have brand new receivers this week. So we'll see if that can play.
Yeah.
And I think long term that will help them both definitely. We'll see if how quickly that can get into the fold. So, Josh, over to you.
Yeah, I like Ummer's guys very much. I had Wilson as one of my starts also. I'm a little more cautious about Wilson, and I'll get to that when we go over to the sits. Although I'm not bold enough to sit Wilson. I do have him as a start, but I'm a little cautious about his. We're already on the topic, so
Yeah.
I'm a little cautious about his touchdown rate. The past 3 weeks, he's thrown 3 touchdowns in every game. That sounds great. That sounds like a quarterback you want to roll with. In those 3 games, he's only completed 13, 17, and 14 passes.
Hmm.
That is very unsustainable production. I mean, the best quarterbacks in the game can't sustain that level of production. And Wilson is very efficient. He always has been. He's a great player, but 3 touchdowns on 13 passes. That's not going to continue. He's going to have to start throwing the ball more, which doesn't seem to be their game plan. They want to run the ball. And speaking of running the ball, Wilson hasn't been doing that. In the past,
Hmm.
he's been a great quarterback option because he gains yards with his legs. He hasn't rushed for more than 21 yards in any game so far this season. So I love Russell Wilson. I've got him on my dynasty team. I think he's a good quarterback. He's already had great success at a young age and a bright future ahead. But right now, I'm a little cautious about his numbers because I don't see the sustainability there. But I mean, I'm not sitting in this week. It's just something to think about moving forward. The other quarterback I would suggest is the quarterback I have in my DFS lineup. That's Ryan Fitzpatrick. I love him this week. 3 out of his 4 starts, as I said earlier, he was a top 10 quarterback, top 5 quarterback, I think, or at
Yeah,
least two of them, possibly all three, depending on format.
yeah,
He's in an offense with with great weapons. I mean, Evans was limited throughout the week, but he logged a full practice Friday, so he's good to go. OJ Howard's back to full strength. Deshaun Jackson as the deep threat. Chris Godwin's really coming along. Their defense is so poor that they have to throw the ball. They can't, even if they had good running backs, which they don't. They would have no choice but to keep airing the ball out. And Fitzpatrick has a great deep ball. He's not the most accurate guy, but neither is Jameis. So I like
clearly.
Fitzpatrick a lot this week. Yeah, I think he's. I mean, I think he's locked in as a top 12 quarterback for any game he starts, and he's got a good matchup against Carolina. So I really like Fitzpatrick this week.
Yeah. Going back to the Wilson, just this is a personal question. So hey, but
Yeah.
hey, questions are questions. So
Mm-hmm.
Russell Wilson or Matthew Stafford? Who do each of you like this week starting?
Wilson.
So Wilson, obviously, you like Wilson if that was your hot start too. So cool.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, that's what I have going. So happy about that. Uh, Josh, I know you kind of mentioned the caution there. I'll just stick with you then for some of your sits, so you can jump right into that.
Okay. Well, I mean, like you just said about like Stafford versus Wilson, I would start Wilson over Stafford, but there are players that I would necessarily start over Wilson. So if you have some of these guys, like if you picked up Fitzpatrick off the waiver wire, I would sit Wilson for Fitzpatrick. Or if you have maybe you have Matt Ryan and Russell Wilson, I would start Ryan over Wilson. Wilson for me is maybe around like 10 to 12 range this week. So he is still a start, but he's a start that there are guys you may have picked up on the waiver wire, or realistically guys that you drafted after him that I would sit him for this week. So Wilson could be a sit depending on how your roster is built. So take a look at your guys. Don't just automatically start him, in my opinion. There are guys I would like over him. As far as sit, as you just mentioned, actually, my number one sit this week is Matthew Stafford. He just lost Golden Tate, who has been his most productive receiver for the past few seasons. He's going against a Vikings defense. That's a tough matchup as it is. He's going to have to adjust to the new flow of the offense without Golden Tate, and that takes a lot away because Golden Tate was security blanket for him. If he looks for the deep ball and it's not there, there's Golden Tate underneath,
Mm-hmm.
open. Golden Tate's a big yards after catch guy as well. Which boosts Matthew Stafford's numbers. Toss a little 5-yard ball to Tate and he takes it for 15. That he doesn't have that now. Now Kenny Galladay, I think, is a great prospect. I think he's going to be really good going forward. Marvin Jones is a great deep ball guy, but he's going to have to make some adjustments. And I think this week's a tough matchup for him. So I'm not trusting Matthew Stafford. My other sit of the week might be a little bit of a surprise. That's Big Ben. I love Big Ben. Offense has all kinds of weapons, so he could definitely go off. But against the Ravens, it's a tough matchup. It's a divisional matchup. Ben has struggled traditionally against the Ravens. He struggled earlier this season when they played. So for me, there's a lot of guys I would start over Ben. I've got him as a sit. Oh, and not to mention the finger issue.
Mm-hmm.
Thankfully, it's his non-throwing hand, so that shouldn't be too big of a deal. But he still has a fractured finger, so I mean, it's a tough matchup as it is. Add in an injury, I'm sitting him.
Yeah, and I think the Ravens are due for a big bounce back game this week too. So I would agree 100% with you with
Yep.
that. Um, yeah, cool. Umar, over to you.
Um, this one seems pretty obvious, but I need to state it anyways. Marcus Mariota versus the Dallas Cowboys. That's automatic sit. Mariota has 3 passing touchdowns the entire year. 3.
Yeah, Emmanuel Sanders has
Mitch
one.
Trubisky, Mitch Trubisky
Yeah.
threw 6 in one game. I mean, come on, guys. It's like this offense is literally just I don't know what's going on with the offense. I mean, I know they want to try to be run first, but it's just the run game has not looked good either. They're averaging only 15.1 points per game. And even though the Cowboys defense is not an elite level defense, they're still, pretty good. And just this Titans offense is just, yeah, very bad. So I don't know why you would start Mariota. I know there's lots of teams on a bye week this week, but yeah, don't go against the grain. Definitely keep him on the bench, and if anything, keep him on the waiver wire.
Yeah, he's been so bad that almost
Um,
Emmanuel Sanders, Danny Amendola, or Julian Edelman might be a better start at quarterback
Yeah,
than Marcus
there you
Mariota.
go. There you go. My next sit is actually Alex Smith, and I know he has a good matchup against the Atlanta Falcons defense, but Alex Smith is not the fantasy quarterback that we saw last year. Through the first 8 games of the season last year, he was averaging 21.3 fantasy points per game. This season, it's only 14.9, so that's a severe drop off. And like I said, even though the Falcons' defense is very poor and this probably can be a high scoring game, I still don't like Alex Smith enough where it's like I would start him even with so many teams on a bye week this week. I'd really rely on Adrian Peterson. That's part of the reason why he's part of my DFS lineup this week. They'll be run first for sure. Alex Smith will maybe manage the game. I know he's been labeled a game manager before, but he's slowly regaining that label again. And I like them to win this game against Atlanta. I think their defense has gotten a lot better, but Alex Smith as a fantasy quarterback is not a good play this week.
Yeah, he's that. I mean, he's always a team first guy, and team wise, the Skins are doing pretty well, but definitely not
Yep.
in the fantasy realm. So, well, there you have it for the quarterbacks. Unless you guys have any other burning ones you want to talk about, let's move on to let's do running backs. Umar, we'll stick with you. Give me some hot running back starts, not named Todd Gurley or Kareem Hunt.
I think you could throw
Damn.
James White into that conversation because that guy has been the model of consistency in that Patriots backfield.
I mean,
And
he's
I
a
know
must
for
start at this point, right? James White.
that's why I said I want to.
Yeah.
You want to throw him into that name
Yeah.
with Todd
Oh,
Gurley and
gotcha.
Kareem Hunt. Because I know for a while that the Patriots backfield has always been this fog of like, who should we start? Who can we rely on? Who's the guy this week? But James White has slowly and under the radar become a guy that you can start every week. I mean, he's been the model of consistency. I know he doesn't do it in the running game as much, but in that passing game, he's easily one of the best receivers on that team. I mean, hands down. So,
Yeah.
as great as receivers they have on that team, James White has slowly established his name as, the best pass catching running back, possibly in the league too. I mean, I don't know, but so James White against the Packers. Packers have a pretty poor defense. Trading away Ha Ha Clinton Dix, I mean, that's throwing fuel to the fire that they're ready to rebuild that defense. Sunday night, it's going to be high scoring. James White's going to do some serious damage for sure. Sleeper start: Alex Collins versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm sure you guys have all heard the quote, "Competition breeds excellence." So I know John Harbaugh came out and said that he wants to go by running back by committee approach. This was before they acquired Ty Montgomery from the Packers.
Mhm.
And since he said that, Alex Collins has actually looked better every week that he's played. I know it's only been a couple weeks, but he's actually looked a lot more dynamic, a lot more agile. He's been more effective with all the runs and touches that he's getting in the offense. So I think with all these additions and John Harbaugh saying that like, hey, we're just gonna roll with the hot hand and figure out who's the best player, I think this sort of poured fuel on the fire for Alex Collins, and now he's finally going to become that running back that we all saw at the tail end of 2017. So, I mean, he closed out 2017 with 16.6 fantasy points per game in that 7 week stretch to close the season. So, I mean, everybody was hoping that that's the guy we were going to get this year, but it hasn't been the case. But finally, I think we're going to see him establish himself again and take away that running back by committee approach. So, it may be a little bit risky, but I like Alex Collins versus the Steelers.
If you're wrong, you're gonna have a lot of Collins faithful that have been sticking with him all year and finally decided to bench him. And this year, they're like, you know what? I'm our Sports Al Dente start him, and if he doesn't go off, so let's hope. But I hear you. I agree though. He has
I'm
looked
ready.
much better.
Yeah, I'm ready for it if people are against me. But like I said, it is risky. I'm not saying it's a surefire start, but you
Yeah.
know, I think I could see him doing better. Obviously, as the season
Yeah,
progresses.
the talent's there. So it's just we
Yeah.
need to see him because he's still getting the majority of the workload. We just need to see him
Hmm.
take advantage of it, and then the Marty Morningwig, I always forget how to say his last name, him not all of a sudden go to throwing screen passes from the 3 yard line when they're in the red zone. So,
Yeah.
yeah, red zone throws be damned this week for Alex Collins
Right.
owners. So, all right, great. Well, there you go, Josh.
Yeah. I hope you're right. By the way, about Collins. I personally just got so frustrated with him. I traded him away in my dynasty league a few weeks
Yeah.
back. But
I don't blame you.
Probably wise.
yeah, but I do. I hope he turns it around. I mean, he's I like him as a talent. For running backs this week, I like, as I said earlier, I like Nick Chubb against Kansas City. I think that's a great. I think he's got a bright future ahead of him. That's a good, up and coming team. I think I think he can do it all. He has to work on his pass catching a little bit. They still have Duke Johnson, but I think that they lean on Nick Chubb a little bit this week. I like him as a start. I like Adrian Peterson.
I want to,
Kind of,
Josh. I apologize to cut you off again. I feel like I'm doing that a lot today. I just
that's
want to.
fine.
I want to jump in on Nick Chubb because he's probably my favorite start of the week this week. And I know I
Yep,
mentioned the
yep.
Bronco game last week, but the Broncos had 184 rushing yards last week in Kansas City. Um,
Hmm.
Philip Lindsay had 95 of those yards. Devontae Booker, who's been basically irrelevant for over a year and a half, and then they drafted
Right.
two running back or drafted one and signed one because of he hasn't been able to get it. He had an additional 80 something yards or 90 something yards as well. Um,
Hmm.
so love Nick Chubb at home. It's kind of a big game for them with the new coaching regime. I think they're going to stick to the run a lot more. So I just wanted to add my little 2 cents there. I love Nick Chubb in this matchup against Kansas City.
No, yeah, I agree with everything you said there, Ryan. They can be exploited on the ground. I mean, their defense, hasn't been great. Their offense is just so good. That's why they're 7-1. But they can be exploited. So I love Nick Chubb. I think he's a great start, bright future.
Yeah.
Um, to go off of what Umar was talking about, Alex Smith as a sit. That's exactly why I like Adrian Peterson as a start. Adrian Peterson, I don't know what happened. He found the fountain of youth or something. He's running like it's 3, 4, or 5 years ago. I mean, he's a man on a mission. Adrian Peterson, he's crushing it, especially with Chris Thompson out. He was never known to have the best hands, but he can catch. Not that he needs to. They just give him the ball and he's pounding it up the middle.
Mm-hmm.
He's running guys over. He's getting yards after contact. He's doing everything that they ask of him. Injuries or whatnot. The guy goes to the sideline, pops his shoulder back in place, and he's still out there doing it. I like Adrian Peterson a lot this week. Um, he's a great start for me. Alex Smith, as Umar alluded to, he's not going to throw for 300 yards and a bunch of touchdowns. They're going to win by running the ball.
Mm-hmm.
My last start that I like this week is a little bit of a. This guy's a little on the fence. I'm not super sold on him, but I think ride him while he's hot, and that's Lamar Miller. He's had back-to-back 100-yard games. He seems to be playing really well right now. Again, as we mentioned, the Broncos defense, they can be exploited through the run game. They have been playing better on that front, especially since Von Miller seemed to get a little upset a couple weeks back. And I said or he said rather, what was the quote when they went to play Arizona? He got up and said, "We're gonna kick their ass."
We're
I
gonna kick
believe.
their ass.
Yeah.
That was it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think he's stepping up his game, but they can still be exploited on the ground. Lamar Miller is really hot right now. The defense can't sell out to stop the run because then they're going to get burned by Hopkins, Thomas, whoever Watson wants to throw it out to, QT as long as he plays. So I like Miller right now this week as well.
Yeah, and if you're a Miller owner, this might be your last week of glory because Foreman's due to come back after their bye next week. So, and I
Right.
think Foreman's going to be, or he's due to practice. We'll see when he actually will play. He has that 21-day period after coming off the IR to make on the final roster. But yeah, this might
Right.
be your last week of glory for Miller. So ride him while he's
Yeah,
hot.
I mean,
Yeah.
a great move. Honestly, a great move would be to start him this week. If he does well, trade him immediately.
Oh,
You know,
100%.
in any format whatsoever. The only format that I would consider not trading him is maybe I think Foreman's the future, but maybe in Dynasty hold off because coming back from an Achilles injury is a little tough.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe just wait another week, see how Foreman practices. But yeah, I completely agree with you.
Perfect. Well, there you go. That will lead us right into sits. Josh, will just stay with you into sits.
Yep. So for sits, I want to sit Dalvin Cook. I know he's supposed to play, but they said he's going to be on a limited snap count, even if he does play. I expect them to ease him back in. Latavius Murray has been playing very well. I don't see this being a Dalvin Cook game. I see them getting him out on the field, seeing how he does, with contact. But I still expect Murray to get a lot more snaps than Cook. So we're going to sit Cook this week until he proves it. Next week could be a completely different story. But for this week, sit him. A surprising sit that I have also is Kerryon Johnson.
Hmm.
Now, based on your roster construction, again, some of these guys you may not be able to sit. Some of these guys you don't have another option, so you got to start him. But if you have another option, consider sitting Kerryon this week. Theo Riddick is supposed to play, so that's going to take away some work in the passing game. As I said earlier, I have Matthew Stafford as a sit. It's a tough matchup with the Vikings. So, even if Johnson was getting all the work, it's a hard matchup. They're going to have to throw the ball. When they do throw the ball, Theo Riddick is healthy. He's going to be back in the game. That could cut into Johnson's playing time. So, if you don't have any other options, you got to roll with him. If you do, maybe consider sitting him for some of these, guys like a Lamar Miller or a Nick Chubb, someone like that. I would play over on Johnson this week.
Yeah.
The last sit I have. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, do you have something, Ryan?
Nope. Go right ahead.
Cool. Last sit I have is LaShawn McCoy. They're going against the Bears defense, and just that whole Buffalo offense has been so bad. McCoy's expected to play, but he's wasting away, unfortunately, on that Buffalo offense. The only bright side, if you have to play McCoy, Khalil Mack is inactive today, so the Bears defense won't be as formidable as it usually is. But I wouldn't start LaShawn McCoy unless I had no options whatsoever. So I got him as a sit.
The unfortunate thing with the McCoy is you're pretty much stuck with him unless you actually drop him. I don't think you're not going to be able to trade. I mean, he's averaged I want to say 8 carries a game. I think his high is 24, and he's had 3 games of less than 10. So he's not even when he's on the field. He's not being utilized when he's been injured. But you're kind of married to him for the rest of the year, unfortunately. But I would not keep him on the bench. I agree.
Yeah.
So, all right, Ummer, go right ahead with your cold sits.
Just to hammer home the whole LaShawn McCoy thing, the Chicago Bears they're the only team to not allow a rushing touchdown this year. And they're one of 4 teams to allow less than 90 rushing yards per game. So I know McCoy had a good game against the Patriots. That's probably his best game this year. But, yeah, he's not a start this week for sure. So if you haven't understood it now, we don't like McCoy this week.
Yeah. Or ever moving forward.
Moving on to other sits I have, Tevin Coleman versus the Redskins. Similar to the Bears, they're one of the 4 teams that have not allowed more than 90 rushing yards per game. So they have a really good rushing defense. Tevin Coleman, I know the Atlanta offense is pretty dynamic, and with Devontae Freeman, it looked a lot better as the 1-2 punch with him and Coleman. But since Devontae Freeman went on the IR, Tevin Coleman has not taken the reins the way that most fantasy owners were hoping he would. He's looked good at times, but he hasn't looked as dynamic as Devontae Freeman and playing that supplemental role. So I think this sort of tells us more that Tevin Coleman is not a every down starter. He's more of that good supplemental running back. Whereas once they get Devontae Freeman back, that makes this rushing attack so much more formidable against opponents. But just on his own, I think also what's affecting him is that Ito Smith has not been as good a supplemental back to Coleman then. So vulturing a few carries here and there. But yeah, so Tevin Coleman in a tough matchup against the Redskins. I don't like him this week.
Yeah, Coleman's kind of that like one trick pony. So if he's got to be the feature, it's easy to game plan against that one trick. So all right, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's perfect. Other sits I got, as we alluded to before, the Tampa Bay offense really relies on their passing attack. So sit Peyton Barber, even though Ronald Jones is out. Peyton Barber will get more of the carries, but Carolina has such a good rushing defense that they'll be able to limit Peyton Barber's effectiveness this week. In case we already haven't mentioned it before, the Titans offense is very bad, so don't start Derrick Henry or Dion Lewis against the Dallas Cowboys. And one of my more interesting sits is James Conner versus the Ravens.
Yes.
The Ravens actually have a very good rushing defense, and as awesome as James Conner has been, I mean, believe me, this has been a complete fantasy revelation for whoever picked him up off the waiver wire, or if you've been lucky enough to draft him.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think this is the week that, James Conner will not look as good. One of his poor games this season was actually against the Ravens earlier when they played in the season. So you can use that as sort of a, sample size as far as just how effective he'll be against the Ravens.
Just to jump in there to back up your point. So against Baltimore in Week 4, at home in Pittsburgh, he had 9 attempts for 19 yards, 7.9 total points. This week is at Baltimore. So maybe he wants a little revenge, but I agree with you that that's a nice sample size to kind of go off of.
Yeah, and as we talked about, there are a lot of teams on a bye week this week, including like Philadelphia and trying to think of other teams, Indianapolis,
Cincinnati.
Yeah.
Cincinnati, Joe Mixon, exactly. So it's like it may be tougher for you to find another option, but they just even if you start him, you're not going to get much effectiveness from him. So if you can find another way to start a different running back, I'd try and go that route. But you can only hope that James Conner will play the way he's been playing the entire season. But chances are very unlikely in my book.
Yeah, and it's more so not. And I'm sorry, Josh, and then you can go right after. It's more so not even just James Conner, it's just that Baltimore rush defense has been very good all season long. So go ahead, Josh.
Exactly.
No, I was just gonna say, Amr, I love it. I absolutely love that. I had Connor written down actually as one of my sits. I wasn't bold enough to go with it. I mean, he's
Ooh.
been so good.
Sallied out,
He's
huh?
been so good. No, absolutely. I mean, he's averaging in PPR leagues. He's averaging over 25 points a game.
Yeah, he's a third-ranked running back.
Yeah, the only game all season that he's had less than 10 PPR points was against Baltimore.
Mm-hmm.
In that week when he had 44 total yards. That was it. 44 yards, passing, receiving combined. I mean, that's I don't expect him to be that poor this week. I expect him to be somewhere in the middle. I don't expect him to put up 35 points or 28 points like he has been the past few weeks. I don't expect him to put up 6 or 7. I expect him to be somewhere in the mid to low teens.
Yeah.
So it's, as you said, Ryan, it's so hard to sit him. Unless you're one of those guys that got lucky. Got him off waivers or drafted him in the 15th round. And then you have better options, maybe like a Lamar Miller, like an Adrian Peterson, like a Nick Chubb. Those are guys I would play over him. But if you don't have the option with 6 teams on bye, I'm not actively trying to sit him.
Yeah.
I would love to start him because I will feel very bad if he's on my bench with 30 points.
That's true.
But yeah, it's hard to get away from him. But this is the only week to do it if you do it.
Yep, I'm just gonna say if there was a week, this seems to be the one, and I think, like I mentioned earlier in the program, Baltimore is gonna have a big bounce back game this week. I think they've lost, I believe, 2 straight. No, or maybe it's just 1 straight. Oh no, they lost last week. I know that, so lost badly. So they're gonna look for to bounce back, and that defense gave up like 30-something points to Carolina, so they're looking for the defense to get back on track. Yeah, so bold. I like it. We did that in our Stardom Situm article and definitely got some flack for it. But hey, you gotta make some bold moves sometimes in this industry. And you can reap the rewards later, or you just fall flat in your face. So, Amr, let's hope for the former.
Exactly.
So jumping into receivers, I wanted to pose a question right off the bat, and then Amr will get into your hot starts for the receiver position. But
Sure.
let me see here. Where was this question? Okay, so Josh Gordon or Marvin Jones Jr. in PPR?
I'd probably lean more towards Marvin Jones Jr. just based on involvement in the offense because Patriots have few other options. I mean, we already talked about James White, but Julian Edelman, because of the health issues with Rob Gronkowski and then also Josh Gordon, Chris Hogan has finally become a lot more fantasy relevant, so he's getting more involvement. So yeah, purely based on involvement in the offense, I like Marvin Jones Jr.
Josh?
That's a tough one. I mean, here's the thing. If it's odd because if Golden Tate were still on the Lions, I'd be more likely to say Jones Jr. But I'm going to go Josh Gordon because I honestly think in the future it's Golladay. He's the man. He's the number one guy. But for now, I believe Jones Jr. draws the number one coverage. He's the veteran receiver on that team. He's, the guy the deep ball threat. I think and he's not a small guy. I mean, he's a big guy too. I think he's going to draw the number one coverage. And I don't know, against the Vikings, that's going to be tough. That's going to be a real tough assignment for him. And I'm going to lean – I don't really like him that much this week. I'm going to lean towards Josh Gordon. Again, I expect that to be a high-scoring game. He's not the first option. I don't even know if he's the second option, between James White, Gronk if he plays, Edelman. But Brady does like Gordon. And, in a high-scoring game, if Brady throws 3-4 touchdowns, he could get one. So give me Josh Gordon.
Yeah, so I guess that makes me the deciding factor, huh? I actually, I like, and here's my 2 non-statistical reasons. Well, one of them is based on matchup.
All right.
One's based on matchup. One's based on because it's a primetime game. For some reason, the Patriots show up in the prime time, and I think that connection between Brady and Gordon may have its coming out party, kind of like it did a couple weeks ago against Indianapolis. So I like Gordon. And like you mentioned, Josh, I like his matchup against Green Bay better than Jones Jr. against Minnesota, who gave up only 120 passing yards last week to the Saints. So take that for what you will, and held Mike Thomas in check. But either one, I think, is a toss-up. But I'll go with Gordon. All right, cool. So then, question answered. Let's move on. Josh, I guess we'll just stick with you. Your other hot starts for the receiver position.
Sure. I mean, this one may be a little obvious, but we'll start a little obvious. I'll say Mike Evans. I mean, he's an every week start, but he was questionable during the week. He had that injury last week towards the end of the game. He came out for a little bit, but then he went back in. I like him a lot. Fitzpatrick's back. He loves him as his number one target. So, I mean, full steam ahead with Mike Evans, pretty much as every week. I also like, as I mentioned earlier, I like Cortland Sutton this week. Thomas is gone. Sutton has to step up. You know, they're going to have to throw that ball. And I expect him not necessarily to have the exact success that Thomas displayed as number one receiver right away. But I do expect him to be a good physical threat in the red zone. He was already a red zone presence, even with Thomas there.
Mm-hmm.
So I expect his value to be boosted a lot going forward. I like him this week. And last but not least, the last time I'll say his name today is Marquise Valdez-Scantling.
All right.
You're getting good at it, though. You're getting good at it.
Yeah, I mean, I would hope. Yeah, again, same exact reasons as as Josh Gordon. High scoring game, two high powered offenses. I expect that both teams will try to run the ball early in the game, but they're going to have to abandon that by the second half. So I expect it to be high throwing. Allison's out. Cobb is limited, but he's going to play. Big opportunity for Scantling, so I like him.
Yeah. Back to the I like Scantling too, but back to the Sutton thing, I just wanted to mention, so Thomas throughout the season only had over 5 receptions one time, and that was in week 1. I think he had 5 receptions in 3 other games, and every other game was less than that. Sutton's most receptions thus far has been 3, but with those 3, he's gotten 2 touchdowns in the last 4 weeks. He's had over 50 yards 2 of the last 3 weeks, and now he gets bolstered that number 2 spot. Bold al dente prediction, I think Sutton's going to be the number 1 rookie wide receiver by the end of the season.
Wow, that is pretty bold.
Like it. He's got some catching up to do with Ridley, but
he has some catching up to do, for sure. Even to Kiki Kute almost, who's had a good kind of last couple weeks as well. But he's not. I believe Kute is out this week, so that's kind of a blow for Houston. But all right, I digress. Go right ahead.
Yeah, I also like Valdez-Scantling this week. New England is currently tied for 5th worst in the league with passing touchdowns allowed, so definitely this is going to be a huge scoring game on both sides of the ball. And yeah, like Josh said, Geronimo Allison is out. Even though Randall Cobb is playing, they're going to get involvement from all 3 receivers in Devontae Adams, Randall Cobb, and Valdez-Scantling, so he's definitely a great start this week.
While we're on that game last time, sorry for cutting you off again.
Exactly.
This is only obviously for deep leagues. How do you guys feel about this name's even harder to say. I think it's Equanimous St. Brown. He's shown some flashes. Obviously, this was going to be deep 12, 14, 16-team leagues, or if you're in a dynasty with a huge roster bench. Do we see any value in him? I mean, obviously, there's been weeks where Allison and Cobb have been out, and he's been not really relevant. He's obviously a young rookie, but do we see him making an impact whatsoever going forward?
Going forward, probably, yeah. I mean, they drafted him for a reason. I like him, but not for this week. Not for me, anyway.
Cool.
He's very touchdown dependent. So, I mean, even if he does get a few snaps in this game tonight, yeah, he's just very touchdown dependent. So if he gets a score, then obviously it's better for you, but chances are unlikely with 3 healthy receivers already on top of him. It's not looking great.
Yeah.
But yeah, long-term prospects looks good.
So if you even have Equanimous St. Brown, do not start him. So all right, go ahead. Yeah. Continue on, Ummer.
As I mentioned earlier, I like Chris Hogan versus the Packers as well. As we talked about earlier, just there's been a bit of a health issue with Gronkowski. Obviously, Josh Gordon is nursing his hamstring injury still. So Edelman, I think, is also on the injury report this week. So I mean, there is some questionable statuses for all these receivers. I have a feeling most of them will play, but because of that, I like Chris Hogan to get more involved. I know a lot of people were hoping for that. When me included, I was hoping that with that 4 game suspension for Edelman, he would be one of the fantasy stars to start out the season, but clearly it was the exact opposite. I think he had one game where he had 2 scores against, I believe, Jacksonville, but besides that, he's been a complete dud. But now that Edelman has actually come back, he's actually looked better in a supplemental role and in the slot, and Tom Brady's looking his way more often. So I like him in this, aerial attack of a game that we're going to get tonight. Um, as mentioned, I also like DJ Moore versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Torrey Smith is out this week, so Devin Funches will get lost to the number 1 looks by the defense. But DJ Moore has slowly been getting better in that offense. He's getting more involvement in the offense, and I wouldn't be surprised if this is his breakout game to really put him on the map as like one of the up and coming receivers, both in the league and then also in fantasy circles as well. So start DJ Moore if you got him. And I like Demarius Thomas in a revenge game against the Denver Broncos. I mean, I know you wouldn't really call it a revenge game because he did leave on good terms. He was, very thankful for the Denver Broncos organization, and it's just a business sort of move, sort of thing. But I think even on the short week, getting used to a new offense, I think he'll fit in really nicely. He'll play really well with Deshaun Watson and that Houston Texans offense. Pair up really well with DeAndre Hopkins, like we mentioned earlier, and I expect him to have actually a pretty good game.
Bold. I like it. Those revenge games are fun, even though, like you said, it's not really revenge. It's still against a former
Yeah,
team, and it's on the same week. Traded 3 days
yeah.
ago, so 4 days ago, whatever. Okay, on to your sits.
My sits, I actually have Calvin Ridley versus the Redskins. I know we like the Atlanta offense; they're one of the more higher scoring offenses in the league, but if you take away his 3 scores against the Saints, he's only had he's only had 3 receiving touchdowns in that span of weeks 2 to 4, I believe, where he had the 3 touchdown outburst, and then he had 3 additional receiving touchdowns in that span of 3 weeks. Besides that, he hasn't looked the exact same guy that we were hoping that he would break out into. In a tough matchup against the Redskins secondary, they just acquired Haha Clinton Dix, as mentioned, so that will take some of the deep threat away. Mohamed Sanu has actually looked pretty good in a supplemental role as well, so I don't like Calvin Ridley as much this week against the Redskins. Um, if we haven't already mentioned it before, the Buffalo offense is
Inept.
pretty bad. So even though Kelvin Benjamin looked better with Derek Anderson's not playing this week. Nathan Peterman is playing this week, so I don't anticipate this offense having any sort of traction against the formidable Chicago Bears defense. So sit Kelvin Benjamin. I don't know why you'd start him. And the only other sit that I would have that's worth noting is Michael Crabtree. Crabtree came into Baltimore and it was looking like he was going to be the number 1 receiver, but based on what we've seen from the Baltimore offense, that's actually becoming John Brown. He's becoming a
Yeah.
lot more involved in that Baltimore offense compared to Michael Crabtree, who looked to be reviving himself in Oakland after, not so great seasons in San Francisco. But yeah, Michael Crabtree has been an absolute, the missing man in that Baltimore offense. So I would definitely keep him on your bench against the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I think he slowly may become a drop candidate as well. So keep Crabtree on your bench against the Steelers.
Yeah,
Crabtree
definitely.
sucks.
Oh, continue on,
uh,
Josh. With that.
No, no, I'm just not a fan of Crabtree. I agree with you, Homer.
before you
Long.
start, just I remember when the Niners drafted him, and I was like, "Oh, the Niners finally got a legit number 1 weapon to have," but he just hasn't been the same guy that he was at Texas Tech. It's just
Right.
I don't know what it is, but just yeah, I think it's just similar to some other college players that just look so dynamic, and they get to the league, and it's just not the same sort of guy. So I'm very disappointed as a Niner fan
Yeah,
that he
did
didn't
did
turn
not
Yeah.
into.
did not turn out. Did not pan out.
Yeah, exactly.
You and everyone feel the same way.
Right.
For other sits, I like as a sit this week, Mari Cooper. Like, I think he's going to benefit the Cowboys offense going forward. I truly do. I don't know if a first round pick was the right amount to give up for him, but I do think, pretty much any competent receiver will be an improvement to that Cowboys receiving core. I just don't know about his very first week playing. I think they might need a little more time. So I'm not going to trust him just yet. Nothing against him, nothing against Dak, just too soon for me. First week in a new offense. So I'm sitting Cooper. Same reason I'm going to go with, I'm going to disagree with you on this one, Umar, but that's okay, is with Demarius. I'm sitting him
Okay.
this week again. First week with a new team, and even quicker turnaround. Cooper at least had the bye week to try to get on the same page with the Cowboys offense. So I think between the two of them, if anyone's going to have success, it's more likely to be Cooper. But I don't want to play either one this week. So I'm saying Thomas just on a short week, new team, going against his former team. You could argue that he knows the defense, but then you could make the opposing argument that the defense knows him. So
Sure.
for me, I want to sit both of those guys. It's too soon.
Mm-hmm.
The last sit I have for this week is Sammy Watkins. I think Sammy Watkins is a very touchdown, like deep ball dependent guy. He doesn't get as many targets as you would want out of him. I think Kansas City finds a lot of success with Kareem Hunt this week. I think between Hunt and Kelsey and Tyreek Hill, I think they're not going to need to go to Watkins as much. So nothing necessarily against. It's not the matchup. It's not him as a player. I think it's just going to be game flow. Is that I don't think Sammy Watkins gets utilized this week. So I'm sitting him as well.
So I got a question for you, Josh. So you don't like Demarius Thomas versus the Broncos, and you also don't like Amari Cooper versus the Titans. So
Right.
hypothetically speaking, if Golden Tate was playing this week, the Eagles were not on a bye. I mean, obviously we don't know the opponent, but would you have considered him a start this week?
It's tough with Tate. Probably not because I mean I like Golden Tate, I really do. But in that Eagles offense, they have. I think it's going to be interesting with him going forward too. I don't know if his value gets a boost or I don't know if his value gets slightly lowered because they already have Zach Ertz in that area of the field. So Ertz and Tate are going to share a similar area of the field. Whereas on the Lions, that was his area. That was all Tate. But now, and Zach Ertz is one of the top tight ends in the league, whether fantasy or real life NFL. The difference being, I guess, that I like Dak, I like Deshaun Watson, but I do think Carson Wentz is probably the best quarterback out of those three.
100%.
Um,
Yeah.
so, so out of the three, if all three were playing this week, I would probably favor Tate the most. Also, because out of those three, Demarius has Hopkins to detract attention, but QT's out, Fuller's out. They don't really have a reliable tight end, so it's just Hopkins and Thomas. With Amari Cooper, he's the number one. He's the guy. So he's going to get the main coverage. Golden Tate going to the Eagles. They're full of playmakers. They got Alshon Jeffrey. They got Zach Ertz. Nelson Aguilar has even been good this season. Although I think Tate's basically taking Aguilar's job. But they have more explosive playmakers and more to detract. So Tate, I think, is in the best position. I would like him out of all three if they were playing.
I like it. Yeah, I would agree with that, but obviously it doesn't matter since they're on a bye.
Right.
So I would assume he'll be a start next week, considering he has that full bye week
Yeah, probably.
going forward.
Right.
Did I'm losing track? Did we get your sits, Ummer, already?
Yeah. We
Okay.
already got those. Let's jump into tight ends.
Jump into tight ends.
Ends.
Go right ahead. Lead it off.
Pretty obvious start here. I like Trey Burton versus the Bills. He's slowly getting a lot more involved in that offense, and I think it's definitely paying dividends for them as well. 23 targets over the past 4 games. He actually finally had his 100-yard game, I believe a couple weeks ago. So Burton is finally getting more involved, and I think he's going to be a second half monster for sure. So if you have him, he's becoming, I think, a slowly must start every week. If you can, maybe try and acquire him, but I think maybe some people may overvalue him now. But yeah, Troy Burton against the Buffalo Bills, that's a good start. I already mentioned it, Chris Herndon versus the Dolphins. 3 straight weeks, 3 straight receiving touchdowns with such question marks in that New York Jets receiving core. He's becoming a lot more reliable for Sam Darnold. 17 targets. The entire 2018 season may seem a little bit troubling, but when you look at 10 came over the last 3 weeks alone, you can see that Sam Darnold is going to him more often. And yeah, Chris Herndon is definitely a sleeper start and very touchdown dependent. Don't get me wrong, but I think just based on the defense that they're playing, his rapport with Sam Darnold is growing. Chris Herndon could be a sneaky start this week.
Yeah, and we always say besides a running game, a rookie quarterback's best friend is a reliable tight end. So he seems to be beginning to become that safety net for him. I like it. Bold.
Yes.
Josh, go right ahead.
All right, I like Austin Hooper this week. I think as we said a couple weeks ago, he's very close to becoming a set it and forget it option. He's getting there. Interesting fact on Austin Hooper, he's second on the team in targets, only to Julio. Not Calvin Ridley. It's Austin Hooper. So he's very reliable. Matt Ryan likes him. He's going to him more and more. Start Austin Hooper. I like Greg Olsen also this week. I think he's back in the offense for a couple weeks now. He's reacclimated himself, and they're going against a defense that has allowed over the past 3 weeks, Tampa Bay, they've allowed over 14 PPR points to tight ends 3 weeks in a row. So I mean that bodes well for Greg Olsen. The last tight end that I like is OJ Howard. Again, just going back to Fitzpatrick, leading the team again. I think they're going to put up a lot of points. I think OJ Howard is the dominant tight end on that team. Certainly the dominant pass catcher. Brait, when they get in the red zone, is a big physical presence. But between the 20s, it's OJ Howard.
Mm-hmm. Yes, agree definitely. And it seems like Fitzpatrick has a little more rapport, which is strange because they're age gap difference. But some of your sits, I guess, that aren't obvious sits. I mean, a lot of tight ends are tough.
Yep. So with going the opposite of OJ Howard, I want to sit Cameron Brate again when they're both healthy. I know I've said this in the past, but people have a hard time getting away from Brate because he does score touchdowns. I mean, he really does. Mm-hmm. He's a big physical presence in the red zone, as I was just saying. But between the 20s, it's OJ Howard's job now. They can run some 2 tight end sets more often than not because they don't have a reliable ground game. Like Umar said earlier, Peyton Barber's a sit. Ronald Jones is inactive. Fitzpatrick isn't the most mobile guy, although he can gain a few yards on the ground. But they're gonna have to pass the ball, and I don't expect Brate to be the first, the second, the third, maybe the fourth look through the progressions. So I got him as a sit.
Mm-hmm.
My other sit, Umar and I are going to continue to go head to head here, which is fine. I'm going to sit Chris Herndon this week. I know he can be a sneaky play. I agree with that. He's a very sneaky play. He's a good guy for tournament DFS play. So that's where I like him. But for seasonal fantasy leagues or for cash games, I don't like Chris Herndon. He's caught a touchdown each of the past 3 weeks. Yes. But when you look at his catches over that time period, 2, 4, and 1. That's just, it's similar, it's going back to, my argument for Russell Wilson, throwing 3 touchdowns on 13 completions, or, catching 3 touchdowns on a total of 7 catches.
Yeah.
That's just short of a 50% rate. So basically half of Chris Herndon's catches are just touchdowns. I mean, that's great if they can get in the red zone. I don't expect them to be in the red zone a lot this week. So for me, until he starts catching the ball more, until he starts getting more, like 3, 4, 5 catch games, I can't rely on him to catch a touchdown every 2 targets. So sit Chris Herndon for me.
All right.
And it's very understandable, but like I mentioned, it's a very sneaky start in my book as well. But when you look at the tight ends that are on a bye week this week, Zach Ertz, Jack Doyle, Eric Ebron, Evan Ingram, CJ Azuma in Cincinnati. It's like you have to kind of scrape the bottom of the barrel for starts. Yeah. And like I said, I know his involvement isn't worth okay, you should keep tabs on this guy, but I like him as like you've said before, to fall into the end zone once. So for that, you can get at least 6-7 points for that.
Yeah.
So.
See, I got lucky in my deep dynasty league that has like 20,000 roster spots. I have Zach Ertz, and he's on bye this week. I also have Jake Butt, who I have on IR. Somehow, some way, Austin Hooper was sitting there on the waiver wire. So,
wow.
Yeah, in my 10-team dynasty with 18,000 roster spots, Don't know how that happened, but that worked out to my advantage. Otherwise, I would be
Yeah.
probably starting a Chris Herndon or something. So
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and again, he's a sneaky play. I like him for tournaments for DFS.
Right.
But I feel like for seasonal, like for head-to-head fantasy leagues, I feel like there's other guys out there that just get looked at more, even like a Jeff Swain or something like that. Like a guy you wouldn't want to start on a week-to-week basis, but he gets a little more targets per game. But Herndon clearly has a better chance to score. So take it. Take I guess based on your needs, whether
Yeah.
it's if you're in a tight game, maybe go for someone who's going to get more targets, like a Jeff Swain or someone else you can find on waivers, maybe like a secondary tight end on a team. But if you're projected to lose, if you're the underdog by like 20 points and you need as much upside, go with the Chris Herndon.
yeah, and let's be real. If you're scraping the barrel for someone like a Chris Herndon or a Jeff Swain or a Jeff Hireman in Denver, you're just praying anyway. So your fingers are
Yeah.
crossed. You're
Yeah.
Right.
you're doing anything you can for good luck anyway. So I think it's a crapshoot at that point. So did you have any other sits, Ummer?
No, I had Cameron Brate as well. OJ Howard's just going to get a lot more involved with Ryan Fitzpatrick under center. The only other one I'm going to mention is Jimmy Graham. All fantasy owners expected Jimmy Graham to relive his New Orleans days, pairing up with Aaron Rodgers now. But clearly, it's been the exact opposite. He has not looked the same dynamic guy as we all have been used to when we saw him in New Orleans, right? When they were questioning whether to give him wide receiver money or give him tight end money. I mean, I remember that was a conversation we used
Uh-huh.
had to discuss, but clearly it's neither now. I don't know what's going on, just whether he doesn't understand the offense, he doesn't have the relationship with Aaron Rodgers. I no idea what it is, but just he is not the same Jimmy Graham we're used to seeing. And even in a aerial attack of a game that we're going to get tonight, I still don't like his chances this week against the Patriots. So I would sit him if you can.
I love and hate Jimmy Graham. I love him to death. He's so talented, and I feel like his number. I feel like I see where you're coming from with that, Omar, and I can totally see sitting him for someone like an OJ Howard or like a Greg Olsen, who people may have dropped, because they were injured.
Yeah.
Greg Olsen was out for weeks, and you might have been able to pick him up off waivers. Or OJ Howard, people didn't know how that situation was going to shake out between him and Bray. So I could see sitting him for one of those guys, but it's a little unfair because Jimmy Graham's lost 2 touchdowns this year due to penalty. And like he caught a touchdown in the end zone clean, and then there was like holding on the complete opposite side of the field, that had nothing to do with him. And then just last week, I believe, or 2 weeks ago, he caught the touchdown and he fell down like right at the half-inch line.
Mm-hmm.
They initially ruled it a touchdown, then they replayed it, said he was down, the half-inch line or whatnot. If those 2 scores had counted, I think we'd be talking about him a little bit differently because his numbers would look a lot better. But I do understand what you're saying. It's just I feel like with 6 teams on bye and with being in Aaron Rodgers' offense with Allison out, I can't find a way to sit Graham. I feel similar to him, like I feel about Kyle Rudolph, for example. I can't find a way to sit Rudolph, but he hasn't scored double-digit fantasy points since week 4.
Yeah.
In PPR. I mean, he hasn't been good, but he also had a touchdown taken away last week due to penalty, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, some of these guys, their numbers don't necessarily reflect how good they've actually been. I think those are just 2 examples of they've been better than the numbers look, and with teams on bye and tight end being what it is, I can't get away from them.
And like we've kind of said all year long, is outside of those top 3 tight ends, it's pretty much a crapshoot anyway. I mean, you're just praying for 10 points almost. It seems like, but yeah, we'll see. That's a tough one though. So, yeah. Well, defense we never like to spend too much time on. I don't see the purpose. If you want to just name 2 starts you like, and then we're gonna, besides like the obvious, Bears and stuff like that, there's 2 starts you like, and then we'll kind of rattle through some questions. I'll just go person to person. So, Umar, if you want to say your 2 defenses, and then Josh, then we'll go into a couple questions and we'll wrap it up.
Cool. I actually got a fantasy pop quiz for you guys. Can you guys name 3 defenses that currently have less than double-digit fantasy points in ESPN standard PPR format?
Like less, like never had a week with double digit, or you mean
No,
like
total?
total?
Less than double-digit points. There are 3 teams.
Well, I know Miami got negative the last 2 weeks in a row, but I feel like they had a couple good weeks before that.
I'm gonna say Tampa Bay.
Yes, they have two.
Two
Um,
total.
Two total points.
the Falcons.
Yes, Falcons have zero.
Wow.
Um, the,
How many
I
did
don't
you
know.
how many did you say there are, Ummer?
Josh got two. Tampa Bay has two. Atlanta has zero.
How many
And there's
total?
one team with 1 point.
Okay, one team.
It's got to be like the Saints or the Kansas City or someone like that.
It's neither of those. They just played on Thursday night and got humiliated by
The
my Niners,
Raiders.
Oakland
Oh
Raiders.
yeah.
Wow.
But yeah, I was looking at fantasy research and I came across that and I was like, wow, there are three teams with less than double-digit points. So I thought that was
And
interesting.
not even like at the 9 range. They are
Yeah,
negative or
exactly.
1 or 2.
Under five. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So good job, Josh. You got two of them. That's
That's
awesome.
impressive. Well played.
But yeah, jumping into my starts. As mentioned, I like the Texans against the Broncos this week. Sleeper start, I like the Seahawks against the Chargers. They've been playing a lot better these last few weeks, so maybe a good sneaky start for you guys. This Seahawks versus the Chargers. Just jumping into my sits, I think the Rams Saints. That's going to be a high scoring game, so sit the Rams defense. And similar to Patriots Packers, sit both of those defenses. You may think that the Patriots could be able to stop Aaron Rodgers, but Aaron Rodgers is Aaron Rodgers. So
Yeah.
keep the Patriots defense on the bench if you got him.
Yep, I agree with both of those. Just real quick, two sits for me, or two starts for me rather. I'm gonna start both the Cowboys and the Titans. I know it's the same game.
Wow.
Titans offense is terrible. Dallas, I
Yeah.
think wins the game through running the ball with Zeke, but Dak likes to hold the ball a little too long, so I expect the Titans to get some sacks, and there could always be a turnover. As for sits, I completely agree. Sit all four defenses in the two games Umar just mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
One more I want to throw out is sit the Chargers. I expect that eventually Russell Wilson's efficiency will come down. I don't know if it's this week. So sit the Chargers.
There you go. I like it. Josh will stay. So we'll just go rattle through about 3 questions each. So I'll just go Josh answer, then Ummer back and forth.
Cool.
For a flex play this week, Cooper Kupp or Nick Chubb?
PPR, I would go Cup, but it's close. Standard, I would go Chubb.
Perfect. Ummer, same thing. Flex full point PPR. Tevin Coleman, Danny Amendola.
Amendola, as we talked about, Coleman has just not looked as good as Devontae Freeman in that rushing attack. So, with injuries in the Dolphins' wide receiving unit, I think Amendola will get more points.
Okay, interesting. I like that. But yeah, Coleman has struggled. So I'm just going to actually stay with. This is probably I don't know. I'll just say it anyway. Tevin Coleman or Jordan Howard. Jordan Howard struggled as well.
Yeah, Jordan Howard against Buffalo. He's slowly getting a lot better and more involved in that offense. And yeah, if you have Tariq Cohen, he's a must start for sure.
Yeah.
Josh, flex as well. Standard scoring. Nick Chubb
Okay.
or Kenyon Drake.
Chubb.
Yeah, I like Chubb all week against Kansas City. I think no matter who
Yep.
you have, you start Chubb.
Yeah, Drake's.
Yeah, interesting to note actually. The New York Jets Miami game. Apparently, the Dolphins are suffering from really bad field issues. I guess it's just been. I guess it was heavy rain over the weekend, and it's going to be really slippery, very muddy. So even though I started Kenny Drake in my DFS roster, I don't know how that game's going to play out. Whether it's going to be more aerial attack, how efficient the running game's going to be, just overall play in that game. I don't know how effective it's going to be. So that may play into your decisions as well with both Dolphins and Jets players this week.
Yeah, there was a report. Yeah, that there were a lot of field condition concerns. Ummer, this is kind of a long one. Let me read it. I have Edelman and Sanders as my receivers. So do I slide John Brown or Alex Collins into my flex half-point PPR?
Alex Collins doesn't get involved in the passing offense as much. That's still Buck Allen's domain there. So I would probably lean more towards John Brown because he actually had a pretty good game against the Steelers when they played earlier.
Yeah, I would almost do Brown and Sanders as my receivers and use Collins as my flex and sit Edelman, but I'm not the one answering the question. So, okay, got a few more here. Okay, so Josh had Edelman and Diggs at receiver, but with the news Diggs is sitting. options are Gordon or Amari Cooper. PPR league.
Gordon. PPR, Gordon. I mean, again, look, it's possible that Cooper, he will be the number one receiver on the team for sure. I mean, it's not going to be Cole Beasley.
Yeah.
Well, it is now. It's not going to
It has
continue to
been.
be Cole Beasley. Rather, no, yeah. You got to go with Gordon, in my opinion. Cooper, I think, will eventually take over that role. It's possible Dak peppers him with targets this week just to see, how his hands are, how he responds, how he runs the routes. But because it's too soon, for me, it's too soon. It's his first week there. Go with Josh Gordon. Go with the guy, playing with the better quarterback in the higher scoring projected matchup. Just, that's the way. And you can't really kick yourself. Look, if Cooper outscores Gordon, you can't really kick yourself because I think Gordon is the right choice to make. He's more likely to score a touchdown. When if they get in the red zone, they're more likely to give it to Gordon than Dallas is to give it to Cooper. Because if they get in the red zone, they're just going to run it with Zeke, or at least they should.
So, but I have like two more questions. But Josh, before I get to that, being you're a Cowboys fan, did you like that move to get Cooper?
I like the move to get him. Again, I don't know if we paid too much, giving up a first round pick.
Yeah.
But he's still young. He's been in the league 4 years, but he's only 24 years old.
Yeah, I believe he's younger than Calvin Ridley, actually.
Yeah, some people don't realize how young he still is, and he still has so much potential. If he can get back, even if he can get back to the form he was his first 2 seasons, that would be a huge improvement for Dallas. And a lot of people in the Dynasty League community felt that his first 2 seasons were just like a taste of what he could do.
Yeah.
He could, legitimately be a top 10 receiving option. So the ceiling super high, and his floor, I think, at worst, he won't hurt the Dallas offense. That's for sure. So
yeah. Agreed. Okay, Umar, quarterback question: Deshaun Watson or Baker Mayfield?
Deshaun Watson. I think with just the questions surrounding the Cleveland team right now, with all the firings that they had, I'm not sure what kind of Baker Mayfield we're going to get for the rest of the season. So, yeah, stick with the more stronger known projections with Deshaun Watson.
There we go. Okay, last one. Josh had to save this one for you.
Good.
Cortland Sutton or Marquez Valdez-Scantling?
Wow,
this is a toss-up. Yeah.
That is a toss-up. Man, Sutton or Scantling? I'd probably go. I'd probably go Marquez Valdez-Scantling. I like Sutton. I think he's got a really good chance to score. But again, I think you go with the guy in the better offense, the higher projected scoring game. They're not going to. I mean, they've maybe found a decent running back in Aaron Jones, but they're not going to be able to run the ball all game long. They're going to have to throw it. And Devontae Adams is going to draw the number one coverage. That's going to leave Scantling with the opportunity to be open more often. Whereas Sutton, there's a possibility. I mean, Emmanuel Sanders is a great receiver. He's fast. He's shifty, but he's not huge. He's not a big physical guy like Sutton is. So I don't know how they're going to cover in that game, but it is possible that Sutton draws the number one coverage. So for now, go with MVS.
Yeah, I'd wait. Yeah, I agree. I'd wait a week. Texans have a good defense. But either one, I think it's a toss-up. But yeah, when you have Rodgers as your quarterback, go with one of those receivers, I think, as well. So
yeah, it's close.
Yeah, there you have it. Did you guys want to add anything else before we sign off? Good?
Good on my end.
Good to go. Well, I appreciate you guys. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in to Fantasy Al Dente, your recipe for fantasy football. There are your starts and sits. We are about 10 minutes from game time. If you have not already set those DFS lineups, make sure to do that rapidly. I will get those cards up on Twitter right now, so you can check those out if you want to. Gentlemen, thanks so much. Appreciate you as always. It's fun as always. And enjoy your Sunday filled of football.
Thanks, Ryan.
Yep, same to you guys.
All right, fellas. Same time tomorrow next week. We'll see you then.